On behalf of Zachęta National Gallery of Art, I would like to welcome you at the Artist Meet session with Petera Johansson. The session is held of the occasion of the exhibition of Petera Johansson in Center of Polish Sculpture in Orońsku. Tonight at Zachęta are with us artist Petera Johansson, Eulalia Domanowska, curator of the exhibition in Orońsku, philosopher Katarzyna Kasia, and French art historian Morgan Labarre. We will listen to 3 speeches and 1 conversation with the artist led by Eulalia Domanowska and Katarzyna Kasia. 2 first speakers, Marion Alluchon and Andrzej Leder, couldn't be here, but they recorded the speeches on video. And we start with speech by Marion Alluchon, curator of the Petera Johansson exhibition in Paris, yes? In Swedish Institute in Paris. So let's start.
Stop. Couldn't we do just one thing before? I would like everybody to rise up. Can we do that? Do you know the rocket? I will learn you this interesting Swedish starter. Can you hear me? Yes? Well, we should do the rocket, and that's a sort of a dance, but it's very simple. You just start with pushing your hands like this, and it goes faster and faster, and then you start with your feet and do the same thing, faster and faster, and then with your mouth, you should try to get a sound out of it, and it should sound like a rocket. And that's the point. And when we are in ecstasy, we send off the rocket. Are you with me in this? So we start. Feet. Faster. And now the sound. Welcome. And now we should move, I guess. Yes. Yeah.
Good evening. So, because Marion Alluchon, who was curator of Petera Johansson exhibition in Swedish Institute in Paris, could not come tonight to us, so she recorded her speech, and we start with her from the beginning. The exhibition was a year ago there, and tomorrow we have the opening, as it was said, in the Center of Polish Sculpture in Orońsku. At 2 o'clock, you are very welcome if you can come, if you can go there. It's just 100 kilometers to the south from Warsaw.
Dzień dobry, everyone. My name is Marion Alluchon, and I'm a curator at the Institut Szwedzkim in Paris. I'm specifically working with contemporary art, and I had the chance, the very great chance, very recently in the last winter, to work with a great artist that is called Petera Johansson. And we did a great exhibition of like a selection of his work that he's been doing for the past 30, 40 years. As well with a site-specific installation, and this exhibition was called Thérapie Nationale. Here you have the catalogue. So National Therapy in English. And this title we chose out of a work that Petera Johansson did and shown in our exhibition. This work was called Family Therapy. And I'm pretty sure you're going to see it as well in the exhibition in Poland. It's a work that we really liked. It's really a work that is really emblematic of Peter's work. It is in fact a big red house that is completely closed on itself. There is no door, there is no window, and the house is hung up 3 meters from the ground, and it turns on itself. And so it's really like, if you picture a hamster running in its cage, it really gives you this feeling of a house that is like really going nowhere and putting its inside upside down and really not going neither forward, neither backward. And it's a work that is emblematic of Peter's work for 2 reasons. First, because it's called family therapy, and it's really linked to his own family and his own and the turmoil and disorder that he experienced in his family. And it is telling about the turmoil you can have in a family that you don't really see from the outside. Often, like the intimacy of the family is not really visible in the outside. So you have really like this relationship between the inside and the outside, and what is visible and what are the appearances also, and the roles you play for the outside. And it's also linked to Sweden in general, because it's those red houses in Sweden, they are very popular, and they are really popular, especially in a specific region that is called Dalarna. And this region is also the region where Peter is coming from. And so in this region you have a lot of those red houses that have become like the typical Swedish houses. And this region is very beautiful, but it's also known for being very conservative and sometimes too conservative about its cultural heritage, at the point that the people are really not open to outsiders, to new things, and sometimes also politically really from the extreme right wing. This political aspect is something that is like one of the main topic of Peter Johansson's work. He has devoted all his career to talk about the nationalism and the extremism, and he shows that are really very important in Sweden, but that are also very, unfortunately, very current nowadays in many countries in Europe. And what is very interesting with Peter's work is that he is really dealing with those questions with a lot of humor and a lot of autodérision, of self-hatred, that makes it very communicative. So I'd like to say that Peter Johansson is like one of the best Swedish artists and one of the worst Swedish artists. Is really the best to represent Sweden, first because his name is Peter Johansson, and you don't have such a common name in Sweden, such as Peter Johansson. He was born in the most like traditional region of Sweden, Dalarna, and his work is mainly focusing on the cultural heritage of Sweden that he distorts all the time, with which he plays all the time. So he's really like the most Swedish artist I've ever known, and at the same time is like the worst Swedish artist I know, because he's really not Swedish. He has this very provocative way to deal with such important topic, which is really not Swedish in a way. You know, Swedish people, they really like this word that is called lagom, which means that you don't do too much, you don't do too small, and that you are really in the middle. You are really looking for consensus. You are really diplomatic, and Peter's provocative art is really like beyond any the Swedishness. But this is what we thought was particularly interesting with this exhibition that we did at the Institut Suédois, the Swedish Institute in Paris. We were really interested into showing an artist that is talking about Sweden while giving another image of Sweden than the one we are used to. Something that is, quite different. Something that is not respectful in a traditional way of the cultural heritage, while at the same time talking about this cultural heritage. And we were really interested into this dialogue, this dialectic between the respect you can have for a nation and its heritage, and at the same time the fact that you can also question this heritage. And what we wanted to show here was, we wanted the people to question themselves about their relationship to the nation, because one can be proud of its nation and of its cultural heritage, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily be too conservative or too protective. And so we really wanted to, particularly in this time of great disturbances, we thought that it would be very interesting for everyone to reintegrate, question himself about this relationship one can have with its nation. So we were really happy to show Petera Johansson, and I think that the public was really responsive. Everyone was found it very interesting. There were lots of laughs, and it was very interesting to see that, because Peter is only working with symbols of Sweden. So it was interesting to see how a French audience here or an international audience would respond to that. And apparently everyone understood, even though maybe they didn't catch every symbols of the Swedish culture. But this was, very interesting to see. And this is one of the strengths of Peter's work, that with humor is really catching everyone. And he makes his art that is very Swedish something that is also universal. So this was really a great success. We had, of course, another. This exhibition was part of a big season on the different images of Sweden that was also composed of a film screening of Amateur by Gabriela Pichler, but also talks with writers that have been writing on the extreme ring and on the question of language, this was a very, very interesting season that was really political, and that was really important for us as the Swedish Institute that is promoting Sweden in the outside, to show also that we were also open to show new images of Sweden and to question ourselves. What is the Swedishness and what is the Swedish image we want to show? Well, I hope that you're going to have a great exhibition. I'm sure you're going to have a great exhibition, because I know the artist and I know he's going to do great work. So I wish you a very good exhibition, and I hope that it will get the response, the same kind of response that it got in Paris. Thank you very much. Tak, dziękuję, and à bientôt.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Zostałem poproszony o krótką wypowiedź na temat nacjonalizmu w Polsce. Dziękuję bardzo za to zaproszenie. No i spróbuję od razu przejść do rzeczy. Nacjonalizm w Polsce już jest problemem, już jest pewnym zjawiskiem mającym wpływ na bardzo wiele sfer życia w naszym kraju. Jest problemem narastającym i będzie prawdopodobnie problemem jeszcze większym w ciągu najbliższych lat, a może nawet dziesięcioleci. Pytanie o to, skąd taka siła nacjonalizmu w Polsce, jest pytaniem, które dotyczy przede wszystkim specyfiki polskiego nacjonalizmu, ponieważ trzeba też zauważyć, że ten zwrot nacjonalistyczny jest elementem pewnego szerszego zjawiska, to znaczy zjawiska, które dotyczy wielu krajów europejskich, co więcej właściwie całego świata. Zacznę właśnie od tego bardzo ogólnego planu, żeby potem przejść do tych spraw dotyczących bezpośrednio Polski. Ten ogólny plan jest taki, że po załamaniu się wielkich takich narracji opartych o pewną wizję przyszłości, opartych o pewną wizję braterstwa między ludźmi, równości między ludźmi, czyli przede wszystkim różnego rodzaju wyznań wiary lewicy, socjalizmu czy nawet komunizmu. Nastąpił taki moment, kiedy wiadomo, Fukuyama ogłosił koniec historii i liberalne, demokratyczne społeczeństwo, którego podstawą miała być samoświadoma, rządząca się swoim własnym rozumem jednostka, miało być pod modelem całkowicie dominującym. Problem polegał na tym, że ten model był jednocześnie elementem wielkiego procesu kapitalistycznej globalizacji, który w najmniejszym stopniu nie stawiał ludzi w sytuacji równości. On tworzył olbrzymie nierówności, tworzy dotychczas nierówności tak w poszczególnych społeczeństwach, jak globalne nierówności. I na tę sytuację wiele społeczeństw zareagowało bardzo mocną obroną tożsamości, która przede wszystkim jest tożsamością etniczną, kulturową, religijną często. I ten plan globalny, który właściwie przetacza się, to znaczy ta sytuacja globalna, która przetacza się przez większość krajów globalnej północy, dotyczy również Polski. Oczywiście trzeba też zauważyć, że ten proces nie jest procesem, w którym nie ma świadomych aktorów, czy świadomych podmiotów politycznych, które próbują z niego korzystać. Jednym z takich całkowicie jawnie działających w gruncie rzeczy podmiotów jest Rosja, która widząc, że przegrała w pewnym sensie politycznie z demokratycznym Zachodem, postanowiła demokrację zachodnią zdestabilizować, korzystając z tych procesów oporu przeciwko globalizacji, o których przed chwilą mówiłem. I wiadomo to, że wszędzie, we wszystkich krajach europejskich, w Polsce również, ale też w Stanach Zjednoczonych, Rosja na różne sposoby, czy to przez politykę w mediach społecznościowych, czy przez po prostu pieniądze i finansowanie partii, bardzo silnie wspiera ruchy nacjonalistyczne. To dotyczy również Polski. Ale oczywiście tego rodzaju ingerencja nie byłaby możliwa, gdyby nie to, że na siłę ruchów nacjonalistycznych nakładają się właśnie wewnętrzne i strukturalne przyczyny, które je żywią, można powiedzieć. I tu dochodzimy do pewnej specyfiki polskiej i tu oczywiście potrzebna jest nam historia. Więc zacznę może od historii bliskiej, czyli od historii transformacji w Polsce. Transformacja w Polsce oznaczała przede wszystkim, ja bym na ten aspekt kładł akcent, wprowadzenie Polski w obręb globalnego systemu kapitalistycznego. Albo inaczej, wejście globalnego systemu kapitalistycznego do Polski. To wejście dokonało się bardzo gwałtownie i bardzo bez szczególnych osłon. Co więcej, dokonało się w społeczeństwie, które było do tego momentu autarkiczne, czyli całkowicie albo w dużym stopniu zamknięte i skupione na sobie. To wejście wymusiło bardzo, bardzo duże zmiany i trud, który wiąże się ze zmianami. Trud, który wiąże się ze zmianami, który oczywiście neoliberalna i transformacyjna ideologia przedstawiała jako przede wszystkim trud dochodzenia przez własną pracę do różnego rodzaju sukcesów, w gruncie rzeczy był bardzo wymagający nie tylko w wymiarze ekonomicznym, ale również w wymiarze głębokiej zmiany dotychczasowego kontekstu kulturowego. To znaczy Polska, która była do tego momentu skupiona na samej sobie, nagle zderzyła się z kontekstem kulturowym całego otaczającego świata. I jednocześnie dokonywało się bardzo mocne rozwarstwienie społeczeństwa. Bardzo duże grupy były albo wykluczane, albo degradowane wręcz. No po prostu ta sytuacja, o której mówi się z zamykaniem jedynego zakładu pracy w jakiejś miejscowości i tym, że po prostu wszyscy ludzie, którzy pracowali, ich rodziny tracili podstawowe źródło utrzymania, była w Polsce bardzo powszechna. Na dodatek ci ludzie nie znajdowali żadnej politycznej ekspresji dla swojego buntu i niezadowolenia, ponieważ ówczesna lewica postkomunistyczna realizowała również neoliberalny model zarządzania gospodarką. To wszystko prowadziło do gromadzenia się ogromnej frustracji i poczucia gniewu. I te uczucia, które są uczuciami politycznymi ściśle, szukały jakiejś formy wyrażenia się. To wszystko działo się w społeczeństwie, którego formy i praktyki społeczne były ogólnie rzecz biorąc wiejskie, folwarczne, użyję tego określenia, do którego zaraz wrócę, i antypolityczne. Mimo tego, że w Polsce mniej więcej po latach 50. dokonywała się coraz bardziej wyraźna urbanizacja, już ponad połowa ludności mieszkała w miastach, to kulturowo Polska pozostała krajem w dużym stopniu wiejskim i w związku z tym zupełnie nieprzygotowanym na ten rodzaj, czy słabo przygotowanym na ten rodzaj funkcjonowania, jaki wymaga nowoczesny globalny kapitalizm. I tutaj powiedziałbym, że to rozwarstwienie, o którym mówiłem, spowodowało, że wyłoniła się z jednej strony grupa, która sobie w tej całej sytuacji poradziła, znalazła sobie niszę. Ona jest w większości związana z dużymi i średnimi miastami i no, po prostu zaczęła funkcjonować w tym globalnym kapitalizmie, w tym nowym systemie, przejmując również bardzo wiele aspektów związanych ze sposobem życia, sposobem funkcjonowania, wartościami tego nowego kapitalizmu. Takim paradoksem jest tutaj na przykład zainteresowanie kulturą żydowską w kraju, w którym Żydów prawie w ogóle nie ma. Z drugiej strony właśnie tą grupę, która znalazła się poza tym procesem i która ten proces postrzegała jako zagrażający sobie, a także zagrażający swojej formie kulturowej. To wszystko trzeba osadzić jeszcze w jakimś takim horyzoncie długiego trwania. Otóż ten horyzont długiego trwania mówi o tym, że znacząca część polskiego społeczeństwa tkwiła w czymś, właściwie do końca lat 80., do końca PRL-u, co francuscy badacze ze szkoły Annales nazwali przedłużonym średniowieczem. Przedłużone średniowiecze to jest przede wszystkim akcent na hierarchiczny, tradycyjny sposób funkcjonowania, przeżywania świata, postrzegania relacji społecznych, polegający na tym, że istnieje zawsze ktoś, kto jest, no, nazwijmy to panem, i ktoś, kto jest mu podporządkowany, jest jakiegoś rodzaju poddanym. Polskie społeczeństwo jest niesłychanie hierarchiczne i to zupełnie nie ma nic wspólnego z problemem czy ze zjawiskiem związanym z ustanowieniem w Polsce Polski Ludowej, to znaczy zniesieniem dawnej dominacji szlachty i ziemiaństwa. Mianowicie również ci, którzy przyszli na miejsce tej szlachty i ziemiaństwa i stali się nową elitą, bardzo szybko przyjęli tą obyczajowość folwarczną, to znaczy niesłychanie hierarchiczny sposób postrzegania relacji. My możemy to zobaczyć w bardzo wielu zupełnie zwyczajnych relacjach społecznych. W szkole, gdzie nauczyciel jest kimś, do kogo i uczniowie, i rodzice po prostu boją się podejść, ponieważ boją się takiej czy innej formy kary czy represji. W szpitalu czy przychodni, gdzie lekarz pełni rolę oskarżającego i obwiniającego władcy życia i śmierci. W miejscu pracy, gdzie współczesny pracodawca polski jest znacznie twardszy i bezwzględny niż większość pracodawców w krajach co najmniej zachodniej Europy. I w urzędzie, chociaż urzędy akurat się w okresie transformacji może zmieniły najwięcej. Co więcej, w relacjach rodzinnych, gdzie model, że ktoś rządzi, pozornie rządzi mężczyzna, zwykle rządzi kobieta, ale też często prawo do przemocy, na przykład przemocy wobec dzieci, jest właściwie kultywowany. I ten hierarchiczny model, który na dodatek jest utrwalany przez religię, przez pozycję i siłę Kościoła katolickiego, który jest we współczesności polskiej delegatem, powiedziałbym, właśnie takiego XVII-wiecznego, kontreformacyjnego sposobu myślenia o relacjach społecznych. I oczywiście w relacjach z przedstawicielami kleru również obowiązuje ten hierarchiczny model. To wszystko układa się na bardzo silnie utrwaloną w polskiej mentalności wizję hierarchii, która musi przenikać właściwie wszelkie społeczne relacje. Mit o wolnościowym charakterze Polaków, wynikający z mitu szlacheckiego, raczej jest źródłem anarchistycznych postaw niż jakiejkolwiek nowocześnie praktykowanej wolności. I ten element długiego trwania jest o tyle istotny, że wszelkie ruchy, które odwołują się do hierarchicznego sposobu myślenia o społeczeństwie, będą miały w tej grupie społecznej, która ten model z przekonaniem podziela, bardzo silną bazę. I teraz możemy wrócić do współczesności i zacząć mówić o kwestii tego zwrotu nacjonalistycznego, zwrotu tożsamościowego, który dokonuje się przeciwko przede wszystkim globalizacji w bardzo wielu krajach świata. W Polsce on znalazł stosunkowo bardzo dobre podglebie, szczególnie właśnie w tych grupach społecznych, które albo ze względu na klęskę i porażkę w procesie transformacyjnym, albo ze względu na właśnie ten rodzaj tradycyjnego, bardzo hierarchicznego sposobu postrzegania świata, zupełnie nie mieściły i nie znajdowały się w tym zglobalizowanym sposobie funkcjonowania, który przede wszystkim wymaga ogromnego trudu. Cały czas trzeba być aktywnym, działać i jeszcze na dodatek bez żadnej gwarancji bezpieczeństwa, z ogromnym ryzykiem poniesienia klęski. Ci, którzy w tym układzie mają jeszcze na dodatek pewne zasoby, wiedzę, kapitał kulturowy czy zasoby finansowe, mają pewną szansę wygrać, czy choćby miejsce zamieszkania, które ich do tego predestynuje. Ci, którzy tego wszystkiego nie mieli, po prostu byli w pozycji w zasadzie na starcie przegranej. Połączenie tych bardzo różnych czynników prowadzi do tego, że partie polityczne, które zaczęły dowartościowywać to, co ma każdy, pewien rodzaj waloru, który ma każdy, a mianowicie tożsamość narodową, język, sposób funkcjonowania, czyli obyczaj, religię, uzyskały bardzo silne poparcie. Powiedziałbym takie poparcie z serca. Ci ludzie, którzy czuli się w taki czy inny sposób, bo to nie zawsze oznacza ekonomiczny sposób, wykluczeni z tego etapu, kiedy transformacja przeorywała Polskę i globalizacja wdzierała się do Polski, Ci ludzie na apel jesteś lepszy, bo jesteś Polakiem, jesteś lepszy, bo jesteś swojakiem, jesteś lepszy, bo jesteś chrześcijaninem i katolikiem, a właściwie bardziej katolikiem niż chrześcijaninem, odpowiadali z ogromnym zaangażowaniem i w ten sposób, w momencie, kiedy pewien konsensus liberalny, który rządził Polską właściwie do 2005 roku, do śmierci Jana Pawła II, bym powiedział, pękł i kiedy Kościół katolicki zdecydowanie zwrócił się w kierunku partii konserwatywnych i nacjonalistycznych, ten głos przebił się w sposób bardzo wyraźny. Ten nacjonalizm daje po pierwsze dowartościowanie tego, co ma każdy, ale po drugie, czyli tożsamości narodowej, ale po drugie piętnuje dotychczasowych wygranych jako pozbawionych tego zasobu, czyli odwraca pewnego rodzaju hierarchię wartości. To na tej podstawie Jarosław Kaczyński może mówić o przedstawicielach współczesnego mieszczaństwa hołota i uzyskiwać ogromne wsparcie i entuzjazm, ponieważ to, że wyznacznikiem życia miejskiego w Polsce stało się picie sojowego latte i tego rodzaju inne praktyki globalnej kultury mieszczańskiej, oznacza wynarodowienie. A właśnie w narodowej hierarchii wartości to oznacza coś bardzo złego, bardzo słabego. Ten emocjonalne zaangażowanie w walkę zaczyna zastępować walkę przeciwko temu, co właśnie wynarodowione, obce, niepatriotyczne itd. Zaczyna zastępować trud, wartość trudu i pracy. To znaczy nie muszę już się starać, nie muszę już się ścigać, wystarczy, jeżeli będę piętnował tych, którzy są wartości patriotycznych, które ja posiadam, pozbawieni, nie noszą koszulki z symbolem Powstania Warszawskiego czy innych tego rodzaju akcesoriów. Co więcej, ten trud jest piętnowany i z lewa, i z prawa. Lewica piętnuje trud jako neoliberalną strategię indywidualnego sukcesu. Prawica piętnuje jako poddanie się dyktatorii międzynarodowych kół, które domyślamy się jakie są, to znaczy antysemityzm tutaj odgrywa, nawet jeśli nie wypowiedzianą, to bardzo istotną rolę. To ogromne i szerokie tło doprowadziło do tego, że nacjonalizm jako pewnego rodzaju konkretna siła, która mogła uzyskać wsparcie dla tak absurdalnych aktów prawnych, jak na przykład słynne karanie za szkalowanie narodu polskiego jako tego, który współpracował w zagładzie Żydów, czy inne podobne. Czy wreszcie ta, powiedziałbym, przerażająca w gruncie rzeczy kampania przeciwko osobom homoseksualnym, a także tym, które nie należą do ogólnie szerokiego spektrum LGBT i tak dalej. To wszystko opiera się właśnie na tym hierarchicznym i tożsamościowym sposobie odczuwania, nawet bardziej niż myślenia, które nacjonalizm proponuje. I efektem tego jest to, że z punktu widzenia partii rządzącej o wiele lepszym sojusznikiem są faszyzujące już zupełnie otwarcie ruchy niż jakikolwiek liberalny ruch o charakterze obywatelskim, już nie mówiąc o ruchach lewicowych. To powoduje, że właściwie faszyzm wszedł, nacjonalistyczny faszyzm wszedł w Polsce do mainstreamu politycznego. No a jak już wszedł, to oczywiście przyciąga do siebie coraz większą grupę wyborców, co oznacza, że nacjonalizm polski ma przed sobą przyszłość, a demokratyczna czy obywatelska wspólnota ma przed sobą walkę. Dziękuję bardzo.
So I asked Professor Andrzej Leder to explain us a little bit the phenomenon of Polish nationalism, because already Marion Alluchon mentioned that there is one of the topic of Petera Johansson arts. And Peter, you started to deal with the subject already in the beginning of 90s. So in my mind, quite early. And why it happened, what does it mean nationalism in Sweden?
Can you hear me? Yes. It's not similar to Poland in the way we could hear here. It had an old story where I think that traditions, folkloric traditions and music and all that have been connected to the fascist and racist movement much more obvious and very active in Sweden than maybe here. That's my belief anyway. And where I come from, a little village in Dalarna, we heard about that place. It's very, very closed to the other parts of Sweden. So this activities, these people are like clan. I don't know what we could call that in clan. Yeah, nowadays they talk about clan when it's about mafia things, and it's families that are really together and protecting their community in many sort of ways. And that was my feeling of Dalarna. So I think for me it was also not just this nationalism, it was also the family, you could say, that was the problem. Because if you think different, or if you do things that are different, or have other sexual belief or political belief or whatever, you are really alone in that society. And that was the things I reacted on and started this art experience, what you call it.
Thank you. And then you made... no, maybe first question to the public. I would like to ask you, what is your image of Sweden? If you think Sweden, so what kind of image you have? So companies.
It's a big country, very green, and with very little people, with very beautiful wooden architecture, with just spaces, sea, and lots of water, quite unpleasant weather. I mean, in the sense that the days are really short in winter. That has to be depressing, whereas it's beautiful during summer because you have white nights. You have beautiful nature, and you look after your nature. You've got lots of animals. And the way of life for me in Sweden is, well, I haven't been there for maybe 15 years, but it used to be like in fairy tales, in the sense everything was natural, and the relationship between people were like in the old days. So it was very, very traditional and touching from the outside.
You should work at the Swedish Institute, I think, in Paris.
I named a couple of companies, but what else comes to me according Sweden? It is, of course, Millennium. and brave journalist and wonderful computer skillful girl. And also the other series of criminal stories which happen in the south of Sweden, where always it is grey and it is raining. And, and the detective is wandering in this fog or mist and solving criminal problems, yeah? Finding the murderers.
Yeah.
So this is because I have never been to Sweden, so for me the landscape from these criminal stories and also the narration about fascists, also everything what I know about Sweden is from criminal stories, which are very good because they have always a very developed social background.
Yes.
Yeah, and political.
And Wallander. He was that series was quite early in this criminal history. Also, it's interesting. Yeah, but all that is true. In a way.
Yeah, but if I might share my first memory from Sweden, it was 1985. I was 7 years old, and in Poland in 1985, we had like communism, real one, and my mother took me to Sweden, and we went there with my 5 years old brother, and we touched the paradise. It was full of toys, everything was, fantastic. And what I remember the most is that the kids were treated in a completely different way than in Poland. We were more important. And for us, it was like, a completely different world. And when I go to Sweden, which I like to do, I always think about this first experience of, real West, and this northern country was a first real West for me. So it was hard for me. What Dorota mentioned, this millennium, for example, when I discovered that under the surface of beautiful social state, there is something rotten, and there is something really disgusting and disquieting. And it was really like, it's for me, it's like, from the point of view of a kid, it was a paradise. When I grew up, I found out the things that I wouldn't like to find out.
Yeah, but it's two things in the same paradise in a way. It's like the snake in the paradise. Under the surface, you have something darker, of course.
So, Peter, you are using some obvious symbols of Sweden, yeah? Like Dala horse. I don't know if every from the public know this Swedish souvenir, which we can buy in shops. Pretty expensive piece of wood, painted wood. Sauna.
It's Finnish, Swedish, yes.
Yeah, Finnish, Swedish, but Swedish as well. Then folk art, which is coming especially from Dalarna. And what is interesting, the idea of Swedish art historian Hazelius, who invented Skansen in Stockholm, which was the first Skansen in the world. So name of Skansen is coming from Stockholm. Thought that it will be good to put houses from Dalarna to Stockholm and show the real Swedishness, the real Swedish culture. So it means that Dalarna is a heart of Swedishness. And is it that's why you started to use these symbols?
Yeah, Skansen is really interesting because it's a fake, of course. It's built upon things you nearly can't find. It's just the leftovers of the society. So they have built a really interesting. It's like a Disneyland or Hollywood in a way, and that's quite fantastic. But yes, I use some things from Skansen actually, but I was living in the middle of it, so it was not necessary to go to Skansen. I just had a look at what I was living in, so it was much easier actually. Yeah.
Is the Dalarna society? As I don't know much about Sweden, so I would like to ask if this Dalarna society, these are peasants. Do they live on agriculture, or is it industrial region? What is it?
No, it's more of a touristic area actually. They live on tourism mostly. Of course, they have some companies doing other stuff also, but it's a really, really touristic area, and both winter and summer. So you have the skiing and all that in the winter, and in the summer you have people, searching for Sweden or what it is. I don't know what they are searching actually. Paradise, maybe.
Yes, of course, paradise, because they've been living two very famous Swedish artists 100 years ago. Carl Larsson, who built together with his wife kind of paradise.
Yes.
And it became pattern, for Swedish happy life for the rest of the 20th century.
Yeah, and modern life at that time, because they were really in front of on quite interesting thing like child, how you should live as a family. They were always eating together, and that was not common at that time. And they had like a library in the kitchen and in the eating room. So they were discussing different things at the table. And both Karin and Carl Larsson, the couple, they were working as artists and made a lot of, own practice. Not just Carl Larsson that was so famous. Karin Larsson was also working very, very interesting with interesting things, social things that was in the village where they lived. So they were interested.
Okay, the other artist was Anders Zorn. And you did a project in his home museum now in Mora, which is, of course, also located in Dalarna.
Yeah.
Could you tell us some words about the project?
Anders Zorn is the most famous Swedish artist ever. He made from being
and the richest.
And the richest also, yes, absolutely. But the thing was, he was from a very poor family and really worked his way up to this place where he was painting, presidents of America and going around the world, really like a ambassador for Sweden, and also bringing new things back to Sweden. He was the first who had, a water system for heating in Sweden, and the things like that was also interesting in that way. He was a friend of the king in Sweden, so they were living in each other's houses, sharing, So he had many strings attached. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think it will be more clear when we see your artworks on the screen, so also the public, you will know what we are talking about. And now I would like to invite Morgan Labar, who is art historian, who your topic is especially humor in art, and especially in French and American art.
Stupid humor, even more. I've been a specialist of stupidity in the arts since the late 60s.
I'm really happy you're here.
Yes, I also thank you very much that you came, because it was, as you know, not so easy because COVID. So really until last day we didn't know if Morgan Labar could join us. But thanks goodness you are with us. So now you will see, you will hear something about stupidity.
A bit.
A bit.
Should we sit there?
Thanks. First and foremost, I want to say I'm very happy to be here and to share some thoughts on the very inspiring art of Petera Johansson. And I want to thank Eulalia Domanowska in particular for making this event possible. Sausages are omnipresent in Petera Johansson's work. His sausages are alternatively hilarious and disturbing, ridiculous yet menacing. With Peter, sausages relate to different types of issues: the biographical, the traumatic, the foolish, the political. Indeed, Peter's sausages have to do with national identity. A couple of traditional motifs and objects, such as the Dala horse, here, from his native area, have become an emblem of Swedishness. The Dala horse, this is from the internet. The Dala horse could be said to be a symbol of Dalarna, the Swedishest of Swedish provinces. It has also become a romantic metaphor for Swedish nationalism and identity. Since the early 90s, Petera Johansson has been poking fun at them. Here, the folkloric, the presumably naive and authentic Dala horse has been sliced as a piece of rural meat, maybe a sausage. It seems mass-produced and ready for mass consumption. That's apparently, according to Johansson, the destiny of popular emblems of Sweden. Addressing national identity, decorative art and folklore has been an important issue for Western artists in the early 90s. Belgian artist Wim Delvoye has transformed concrete mixer into white and blue traditional Flemish porcelain. He has also put blazons and coat of arms on construction work shovels. The Dala horse has on his back the Swedishest of the Swedish decorative pattern, the Korbit. Turning himself into a goofy and hungry Dala horse, Petera Johansson has challenged the vernacular motif since the 90s. On this 1998 performance, the artist stands in front of a street food stall, eating a hot dog. My proposition for this talk is to state that the Falukov plays an analogous role to the Korbits or the Dala horse. Omnipresent in Johansson's work, the Falukov sausage might be said to be an emblem of Swedish food and by extension, an emblem of Sweden. This is an image also taken from the internet. The early 90s were a period of vivid use of and reappropriation of the vernacular by artists. The food stall in front of which Johansson stands echoes the flower stall that British artist Michael Landy put on for the Sensation exhibition at the Royal Academy of Art in London in 1997. The generation of artists featured in this exhibition, labeled YBA, Young British Artists, were concerned with vernacular Britishness, mass media spectacle, tabloids, and success. And with popular forms of humor, like turning a cucumber into a phallus, such as the sausage turned into a phallus, is a topos of comic literature and iconography. In the very early 90s, other artists challenged the grand narratives of national identity, like Mike Kelly, who, quote, tarnished our beloved figures, end of quote, by writing insanities and schoolboys' graffitis on various pages of US history books. Costumed as an 18th century aristocrat, Johansson might be asking the Fakulov sausage, as Hamlet was addressing the skull, is cultural identity a construct? In 1996, already, Johansson titled the series, quote, Cultural Identity as a Construct, end of quote. The sausage spread all over the work. such as in this birdhouse obstructed by a sausage that recalls, again, Mike Kelly, among others, one of the most subtle challengers of national identity in the United States and the American dream. I can't help but thinking about his weirdly phallic dolls that he sewed himself in the 90s in order to play with gender expectation and stereotypes. Here, he collides a so-called feminine technique with a supposedly masculine motif, the penis, turned into a ridiculous form. But there is also a subtle intertext. Kelly addresses the first generation of feminism, both he admires and wants to challenge. Feminist artists then were essentialists, some of them using the vulva motif all over their artworks. Kelly preferred to blur gender expectation, poking fun on what a real man should do in this series called Half a Man. Some of Johansson's sausage works clearly partake in this history. It doesn't work.
Oh.
Oh, here we are. In this video, the sausage is eaten in a very crude manner. The way the sausage is eaten in a very crude manner recalls all the tradition of the sausage-phallus association, reinterpreted in a very camp manner, flirting with the grotesque. There is something about the act of devouring, tearing food apart. In addition to national identity, the sausage challenges gender identity as well as consumerism and the standardization of cultural products. Let's go back to the 60s, when mass-produced food started to be all over the Western world, to the extent which it could epitomize the transformation of the whole food system, and by extension, the cultural Adorno dismissed as cultural industry. American artist Claes Oldenburg imagined himself as a sausage maker. These are his own words. While at the very same time, German artist Sigmar Polke painted a sausage eater ready to fit a very long sausage rosary. In the 60s, there were mass-produced sausages all over the place. Sausages is one of the first industrially produced food. It participated then in cultural homogeneization, while still, and one should stress this paradox, remaining a regional symbol, such as the Berliner Currywurst or the French Saucisse de Meurthe or the Swedish Falukov. If typical sausages have kept their original and local connotation, the hot dog embodies the homogeneization of eating practices. Claes Oldenburg sketched a project for a giant hot dog. Wayne Thiebaud painted a side of his ranges of cakes, ranges of hot dogs. David LaChapelle played with the motif in a subtle and confusingly erotic way. Pop artist Mel Ramos did it in his usually vulgar and gross way. Petera Johansson, staging himself as the sausage to be eaten, offers a radical counterpoint, ridiculizing such a macho views. And poor art, I must say, about Mel Ramos, whom I hate. From there, I will characterize sausages in Petera Johansson's work in three manners. Sausages are funny, sausages are politics, sausages are dynamic, which is kind of a combination of the both of the previous one. Going back on the timeline, Johansson's proposal relates to folk art and vernacular comic painting, such as this 19th century French charcutière, a woman sausage maker. Being dressed with sausages comes from even older periods. Already in the 16th century, carnival was represented with a rosary of sausages around its neck, fighting against Lent. When Petera Johansson dresses with a short pants of sausages and a mock Mexican hat, he might recall representations of street sausage seller from Italy or the traditional figure of Hans Worst in the Netherlands and Germany, who is also a character of the Commedia dell'arte in Italy. But some of Johansson's sausage-bearing figures are more frightening, even though they fall in the same tradition. This catch fighter isn't friendly. The sausage stuck in his mouth seems almost a weapon. Skinheads, champions of extreme nationalism, are actually pretty close to him. The sausage makes them slightly ridiculous, but they are still frightening. The sausage might be said a signifier of stupidity. That's a theory I developed in a recent article. A basic sausage added to an image, even the most political image, like in France West poster, first makes ridiculous the person who has it on its head or in its mouth, and second makes this person look stupid. French art historian Bertrand Tillier underlined that the caricature of King Louis-Philippe as a peer is both justified and quasi-inept. Inept and inert, the peer is reduced below the animal in a process of regression specific to stupidity, that philosopher Gilles Deleuze qualifies as, quote, universal, digestive, and leguminous bottom, end of quote, before specifying that the tyrant has, quote, not only the head of a bull, but that of a pear, a cabbage, or a potato. One might add of a sausage, which compound to the digestive and the leguminous. The equivalence of ingestion, digestion, and excretion. In a sausage, one eats the digestive organ itself through thing made from minced meat, which is shapeless, stuff in a gut, in an animal gut, or in a mouse. No. The sausage, then, as does the banana, it ridiculizes its bearer and makes it stupid. But one must distinguish the harmful artist, Erwin Wurm, with bananas, from the neo-Nazis. Here comes the ambivalence of sausages in Petera Johansson's work. The sausages in this pedophile pole in the Bornatro exhibition, which brought the issue of child abuse in Petera Johansson's work, it's both ridiculous and frightening. Ridiculed by the sausages such as the Tree of Liberty in from the French Revolution is ridiculized with pretzels and sausages in Germany in the early 19th century. This is profoundly ambivalent. As well, one might say that the sausage in the polar bear mouth here in the very same exhibition is a way to ridicule the abuser, a kind of symbolic revenge. The sausage here could be, say, a tool of emancipation, symbolically getting over the trauma of child abuse. A reason of this is that the phallus, the sausage, is no longer a phallus, no longer a signifier of power, domination, or violence. The sausage is dumber when it is no longer a phallus, but hails back to the shapeless, the indistinction of minced flesh, the process of digestion that compresses it and gives it its shape. But in some Johansson's artwork, sausages are still very violent and ready to harm. Then I'm getting closer to my conclusion. Sausages are dynamites. Turned into a kind of plaster, they even become very harmful. Here are the bottle crate filled with sausage foam from 1993. They kind of look like dynamite, the same dynamite invented by a famous Swedish man who gave his name to the famous prestigious international prize, the Nobel Prize. In the Bornatro exhibition, where we learned about the artist's traumatic experience of being abused as a child, the sausage wallpaper gets anxious, and the mechanics that make the sausage-like stick move back and forth from a hole carries dreadful images. They do not move frantically which could have been funny, but they move slowly on a perpetually identical rhythm, repeating and repeating. They are present all over the church-like place, referring to the place where it happened and the silence around it. In the Parisian exhibition, Petera Johannsson's National Therapy, one came from the very luminous and funny first floor with yellow painted walls and Swedish flags moved by fan toward the sausage staircase, where sausages merge into the inform, no longer phallic forms, but sometimes vaginal, sometimes anal, almost an illustration of the cloacal indistinctions in the psychoanalytical theories. But then the spectator penetrates a labyrinth where stiff sausage-like shapes or stick, I don't know how to qualify them, go back and forth from holes in the palisades. These palisades have also empty holes through which one can look inside. We could see, for example, such a video. The artist, dressed up as a sausage maker or a chef, is throwing meat and sausages to the camera with a kind of mad and sadistic face. Then he gets closer and rubs the camera with the raw meat. This is typical of Petera Johansson aesthetics. We laugh. I did laugh a lot at him throwing like a madman some sausages at me when I was looking through the hole. And they are scaring. What would he do if he were on the other side of the labyrinth? Many things were to be seen from the halls. But one should remember that we came from the sausage wallpaper. And in the middle of the staircase are the neo-Nazis on the path to the labyrinth. The very careful observer could have noticed that there was, under an old Swedish painting from the Swedish Institute collection, under a table not easily visible, a crate for beer bottles filled with sausages. Sausages that resemble dynamite sticks, as I mentioned earlier. The whole installation might be ready to explode, while the mechanical sausage is still moving slowly and regularly back and forth. The mechanical sausage fucks you. It slowly imposes its power. And that's also what identitarism does to the mind. Xenophobia, homophobia, misogyny, conservative ideas about identity, national values, fearing the other, all that is present in the installation. Petera Johannsson's sausage machine could be said to be a metaphor of what nationalism does to the mind. As a conclusion, let's stress once again the importance of the multivalence of Petera Johannsson's art. There is no one single message, even though I try to give an orientated narrative of sausages and the politics of sausages in his work. Of course, the critique of the general fallback of nationalist ideas of identity is targeted by Petera, but the artworks tell way more. Or more precisely, they don't tell any lesson. They put you in front of something you have to negotiate with. This is an uneasy situation in front of Petera's work. This is uncomfortable. This is both funny and terrifying. And I think the great strength of Petera Johansson's work is that it cannot be reduced to any discourse. It resists us. It resists univocal interpretation. It takes us where we don't expect to be taken. Thanks for your attention.
now the last part of our meeting, discussion of Katarzyna Kasia with Petera Johansson, and I would
hopefully
like,
with you.
please, yes, and please put on the other presentation where you see some already shown art pieces, but also many new.
Okay, first thank you for your lecture. It was really very, very impressive, and I'm really glad that you came to Poland and you were present here, because I value presence more and more since we are locked down, and it is like very, very good to have all of you here. First thing that really struck me, it's what would you say about the difference between Sweden and Swedishness, between this real thing and the construct?
Oh, that's a difficult question.
I'm starting with difficult questions.
Oh. Well, Swedishness for me is the surface, the ennakkoluula, they call it in Finland, the prejudice in a way. For me it is like that. And it's very useful when you work with things like this. So I think I prefer Swedishness. Actually.
So you think that Sweden would be this real thing, which is covered by this sort of, you know, like you have this sugar cover on cookies or something like that?
It's very good.
And underneath, you
Picture.
have underneath this surface, you have this real Sweden, which can be dark.
Really dark.
And and sausage-like.
And in black and white, as Ingmar Bergman.
That's true. But, you know, there is a huge difference. And as Eulalia put it, there is a difference between patriotism and nationalism. And where do you see that difference?
I would like to give an example. In Norway, they talk about this positive patriotism and positive nationalism when they are doing this 17 May, 17th of May, when they really gives it all to this party for the nation. I'm not so sure it's so positive, but I think you can see a difference when all, in a way, are involved. That I think is more positive anyway. I don't know if I really like patriotism or nationalism at all, but I can see a difference anyway.
Yes, because I was thinking that there is this difference maybe, but at what level does it start? You know, when do you can say that your patriotism is somehow exaggerated? It is too much, like it becomes oppressive, or it becomes a tool of exclusion.
I think for my experience from this local village, it was when they were afraid in a way. I think it's very simple that it was out of job, out of you know, this structure in the family, out of all that necessary to have a social life in a way. I think that was one of the important things that made people go into dark places or dark thinking.
Yeah, because it includes violence and xenophobia and homophobia, like the recent things that we have in Poland about which Professor Leder was talking. But that's also a question of tradition. Like, who owns the tradition? Who owns the symbols? Who owns the national heritage? Like, you know, what are you doing with the tradition, Petera Johansson?
Yes.
Like, you destroy it.
That's really difficult questions.
Question it.
And, for me, to do this is really basic needs. It's a sort of instead of psychology or I don't know, therapy or something, I went into constructing my own world in a way. I think I needed that to come out from my problems and my experiences. So it's a very personal work and personal way of looking at things. So I think I don't know who owns anything. I don't. It's just that I needed to do this. So it was not a question if it was me or who all together. It was just something much more deeper and I guess tough for someone and really boring for others. But I was needing to do this. So I don't know who owns it. I used it.
Yeah, you used it, but that there is this sense of humor which Martin mentioned in his lecture, and I think that it is a very powerful strategy of, finding your way to destroy some construct that was made in order to protect the symbols, for example. It's easy to wear the T-shirt with some national symbol, as Professor Leder said in his introductory lecture, but it's hard to question it. And this tradition of questioning, of changing, how do you think it is powerful, but how does it work? What is the mechanism of humor here?
What is this uniform?
It's a mix of one of Hitler's uniforms with patterns, folkloric patterns from the area where I come from.
Is this German uniform?
Yes, it's a German. Yeah, it's a German. Good.
How does the humor work? I will say in this...
In these works, not general.
In this work. I mean, in Peter's work. I think it's like... So there is like there's different levels. The first one is like the kind of, you're surprised because it's a bit grotesque really often. It plays with like expectations of like how to behave in society. So it's just like, he's just like fooling around. That's the first level. I think like the more subtle one is that he used like very well known in Sweden like symbols, but he deturn. Is deturn a right word in English? I don't remember. Well, he kind of take them where we don't expect them at all. Like when he turns himself into a Dala horse, which is like both very stupid idea and very smart idea at the same time, because it gives like a very powerful image. And it's a way to show that, there might be something wrong with the Dala horse actually. He puts attention on things where nobody pay attention, because it's all over, because it's like the shared shared knowledge, shared culture, everything. So it's a way to just put the finger on like things which we don't see because we're used to them, and we don't see the problem they might embed somehow, such as like a way to fall back on national identity. Like I was looking for a word to say that. I was about to say like fold. We have a word in French which is repli identitaire, which means like repli is like fold and fold, like fold first and second time. So it's like you're really folding on yourself, on your like so-called national identity. And it's, I think, a really powerful way to stress that.
But it's also actually art. And I think that surrealism is something that I really try to use, or what you say, traditional surrealism. Is that a word? I don't know. But to use that to just put two very wrong things together makes humor, and it makes you start thinking. And that had been one of my way of working, actually.
Totally. It was both like humorous and poetic at the same time. Yeah, like the encounter on a, I don't remember the quotation, but like on a sewing table. I know of like a surgery table, of a sewing machine and an umbrella.
Yes,
By Lotte Amont. Yes.
I think that it is therapeutic, but can I ask you a question, Eulalia? One short question.
I would like to explain quickly that this project. Sorry, I would like to explain what you see, because it's a very serious project by Petera Johansson, A Little Sweden, which was played in Germany. So, Peter, could you tell us what you did?
Oh, wasn't it you that should say?
No, just...
No, Little Sweden was a little island in Münster, and here were 3 skinheads living one summer in the 90s, and they should live quite normal summer life, Swedish summer life. So they were eating breakfast and swimming and enjoying themselves, and they had barbecue and serious drinking in the afternoon with a lot of vodka. That's in that time was quite usual in Sweden. So they were just living there, actually.
They were actors.
Yes, they were. They were actors, 3 actors.
And this project, how you call it?
Oh, untitled, actually.
And this one?
This is... Oh, if I remember the title, it was a long title. Guten heute alle Leute, es ist unser in der Luft, bald kommen die Löwen und die Bären. It's a silly mixture of words, German words making nonsense. Actually, for a Swede, it makes sense.
But these 2 projects were really dedicated to nationalism.
Yes, and it's so many levels. It's really difficult to explain everything. But these customs, I had one on me. You asked what it was, and it was that one. Yes, I made out of on internet you can find everything, and I found some of Hitler's uniforms, the design and the cutting and everything, and you can buy the traditional textiles from somewhere here in Poland, actually, and it's from the 30s, the material, and you can find these signs and this military stuff also on internet. So you can buy all that, and you can do your own Hitler uniform. And the strange thing was, when I did 2 of them, they were perfect match for my body, and that was really a strange experience. But so I did them, and then I took from that area in Dalarna. Some of those areas, the villages there, were highly involved in the Second World War. They were building their own national party, and they constructed, lists of the Jews and the gay. They had lists on all the people that they will collect when the Nazis come into Sweden, and it was a really right-wing area, and it was a lot of Nazis, even in the police, for instance. So Dalarna is very close to Norway. At the border, the police and the military police in that area, they shot everyone who tried to come from Norway over to Sweden. They were not supporting the patriots. So this is, it's many levels. So I used this folkloric pattern because the people who was involved in these Nazi movements under the Second World War, we found them later on in the 70s and the 80s in the Heimat movement. I don't know what it's in Polish, but hembygdsrörelse we call it in Sweden. But
Heimat, we understand.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they had the same position, like secretary, economic, the president of this group, and so on. And they were exactly the same people. So for me, it was this connection between the war and the folkloric protection in these contemporary times. So I thought that was really interesting. So I did a lot of different works around that. Is it clear?
Thank you very much. And now you would like
No,
to...
because I'm still thinking about the therapeutic role of this art. Like, you know, you can, and I was actually also thinking about how it would look like in Poland if we would take a Hitler uniform and embroider it with some, I don't know, traditional Polish embroidery. Yeah, like and I think that it would like, I can't imagine the reaction of the Polish authorities right now. And that's my question to Eulalia. You think that we need Petera Johannsson's art in Poland right now in particular? Because I think that we do.
Of course, it's very, very important. And I've met Petera Johansson 20 years ago. Thanks goodness, thanks to a German curator who introduced me to his art. And all these 20 years, I was absolutely amazed by his easy way to attract people. That I think that your art, it's like the shot in 10, you know. And after 20 years, it's still actual. And I would like to, which is very sad. It's like Petera Johansson using humor and, you know, this stupidity maybe in art. Talking about very sad and tragic and traumatic things also in your family, which you are showing especially in your labyrinth piece, which tomorrow will be on will be in Orońsku. You can see them, but also I would like to introduce words of director of Swedish Institute in Paris, Eva Kumlin, who wrote in the Paris French catalogue such a word. What constitutes the national and cultural identity in a time of growing populism, nationalism and segregation? In the answer to this question, we may state that Petera Johansson offers national therapy for everybody, and that is the sweet spot between patriotism and nationalism. So I think we need Petera Johansson, and he's the strongest artist which I found who talk about these topics. If we think about Polish art scene, there is nobody like him in our Polish art. So I would like to, especially in this moment, to show this kind of art, to reflect, to maybe also to make people thinking, to thinking and feeling. and make maybe this Swedish consensus, which we really need in Poland. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting Petera Johansson in Poland. We really need him desperately, I guess.
Wow.
And last question is about Orońsku, about the place. You've been there. You told me that you visited Orońsku twice.
Before,
and,
yes.
Yes, and how do you find this particular space? I want to invite them to come tomorrow, so, like, make it...
Yeah, the Center of Polish Sculpture is, for me, it's fantastic. It's so much. It's the park with this huge, strange ensemble of sculpture that is really, for me, fun, and also a big experience of Polish sculpture. But it's also the houses. I really think the houses is fantastic, and I have this huge chance to do an exhibition in the Orońsku, and it's a really beautiful building. So it's I'm doing quite ugly art, I think, and put that in this really, really beautiful building also makes a level to this my work. I think it's fantastic to get this chance to do this. It's really great.
But there is also one sculpture in the gardens, yes, in the park.
Yes, it is. It's this turning red house that Marion was talking about in the beginning. So we have a Swedish house there also.
That's great. Eulalia?
Yeah, I would like thank you and ask the public if you have any questions to the artist, because it's almost 2 hours we are talking here, and almost. So if anybody would like to put question.
Or should we do the rocket again?
Yeah, maybe we can end this.
Up with the hands.
So
no questions, then it's rocket.
No questions. So thank you very much. Thank you for the author. Thank you for the other participants, and
thank you,
Morgan from Paris. And I would like also to thank you finally to Zachęta Gallery, Marta Miś, who helped me to organize very much this meeting, and the gallery for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And of course you are welcome to the exhibition in Orońsku. It will be until middle of the December, and the opening is tomorrow at 2:00. And of course, there will be the catalog with many texts. And the first text is very interesting because it's a letter of Bruno Schulz to Petera Johansson. The letter was written by a Swedish
art critics. And,
yes, art critic. Tom Sandqvist, who unfortunately could not come, but it's possible, of course, to get the text in the catalog, so you're welcome.
Morgan?
I wanted just to add that I have seen the show 3 times in Paris, because we had a round table. So I've seen first for the opening, and then I came to prepare the round table, and it's really worth to be seen. Like it's I didn't know your work before. I was invited to discuss it with you, and it's a real encounter with something. So it really works on the people. Like, I really invite you to go. It really works, and it is funny, and it is disturbing, and it just raises questions without teaching you anything. It just like makes something work. So that's good work usually does that. So
thank you. Wow.
Go to Orońsku.
Wow.
So work for feeling.
Thank you for coming. Dziękuję bardzo.